Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Gentry, President and founder of RG Strategic Interventions, LLC. I want to welcome you to this module, which is part 4 of a 4-part series on teaching responsibility. And we've been using concepts of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, or cognitive behavioral interventions as a backdrop to the idea of teaching responsibility. We use CBT concepts because research has proven that that is the best method of changing behaviors. So in part 1 of this series, we talked about some general themes concerning CBT. So it will be helpful for you to go there and familiarize yourself with some general concepts and some basic interventions that we apply when working with young people. The second part of this 4-part series of teaching responsibilities focused on automatic thinking. And what we learned there is that for the most part, people in general think in automatic ways. And decisions are made not by looking at future outcomes or long-term goals, but basically situations present themselves and people act in an automatic type way. So we really focused on automatic thinking, how that works and how it applies to the decision-making process. And oftentimes automatic thinking tends to land people in trouble. So we want to counteract automatic thinking with rational thinking and slowing down the thought process before we act. In part 3, we talked about some of the concepts. What kind of things do we teach when it comes to CBT? So it will be helpful to go to the third part of this series in regards to some specific things. So in part 4, we want to talk about cognitive skill interventions when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy. So some of the interventions that we focus on are problem solving, anger management, conflict resolution, building appropriate social skills, moral reasoning, risk management, and how to avoid high-risk situations, and issues concerning addiction. So I want to start off by talking about a foundational concept again, which is the ABCs of cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, what do we mean when we talk about the ABC model or the ABCs of cognitive behavioral therapy? We focus on antecedents, which is A, beliefs, which is B, and consequences, which is C. So we'll begin by talking about A, which is antecedents or activating events. And what does that mean? When we talk about the A's in cognitive behavioral therapy, we're talking about events or situations that occur that an individual has no control over. So what is the event or what is the antecedent that precipitates a chain of events that happen with an individual in the decision-making process? So in previous modules, I mentioned the fact that people do not react based on events, but they react based on how they interpret events. And so every situation that presents itself causes a reaction. And that reaction is based on our core beliefs or how we see life. We oftentimes refer to this as a person's game book for life. And so based on a situation that presents itself, based on our worldview, we are led to think a certain way. And so that antecedent or activating event is the situation that occurs that's beyond our control, or a situation that we have actually no control over, but it leads us into certain thought patterns. And then we go from there. The second part of the ABC model is B, or beliefs. And what we mean by beliefs is that this is a situation in regards to how we think or believe about the event that just happened. Now, this evaluation or this belief system can be rational or irrational. And finally, C are the consequences. Basically, consequences pertain to how we feel and what we do about the situation that presented itself before us. So the ABCs of cognitive behavioral therapy is a foundational concept. Now, when we talk about interventions, I want to focus on 4 distinct interventions that we teach to help people understand the process all the more better. So we talk about the thinking chain, number 1. Number 2, we talk about the cognitive iceberg. Number 3, we talk about wants versus needs. And then number 4, we talk about rational versus irrational events. So we'll cover those 4 principles in this 4th module in regards to cognitive skill interventions. So let's talk about the thinking chain. The thinking chain is very important and is easy to teach once you understand this concept. And the thinking chain works like this. A situation presents itself. That situation causes a person to think a certain way. Thoughts bring forth certain feelings, oftentimes bodily sensations. From those feelings, we react a certain way in regards to our behavior, and our behavior produces certain consequences. So as a teaching tool, it's a very powerful model to be able to share in groups of individuals when we're talking about how people come to certain decisions that they make. And from the thinking chain, we can very clearly display that this decision-making process is not automatic, but we can actually slow it down and break it down into parts. 4 parts. Situation occurs, thinking, feelings, behaviors, and then consequences. And so we can focus on each one of those, and we can have some very powerful conversation and a very powerful way to process these individual parts of the thinking chain. So that's one of the first interventions that we use when we endeavor to teach responsibility to young people. The second thing that we teach is this concept of the cognitive iceberg. Now, when a person thinks about an iceberg, one of the first things they think about is the Titanic. The Titanic was just an unfortunate situation where during that time, this massive ship that the architects felt that nothing could destroy this ship. But unfortunately, it was an iceberg that destroyed the ship. When we think of an iceberg, we oftentimes look at the top portion or the tip of the iceberg. In fact, that's a very common term that's used. Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And what we mean by that is there's a lot more to that iceberg underneath that waterline than just the tip of what we're seeing. So when we talk about this cognitive iceberg, we not only focus on the part of the iceberg that's showing, which is above the waterline, we view that as the behaviors. And so traditionally, when we're dealing with behaviors, we don't necessarily deal with behaviors in the best way. For instance, when we punish behaviors, the only thing we are addressing are behaviors. We're not addressing anything below the waterline. We're not addressing, for instance, the thoughts, the feelings, and the physical sensations that led to that behavior. And even below that, our cognitive structures, thought patterns, and core beliefs and attitudes. So when we're dealing with the CBT process and teaching it, behaviors are only a small part of what we focus on in regards to changing behaviors. Again, behaviors, that's only the tip of the iceberg. But we have to address what's under the waterline, which is far greater than the behaviors. The behaviors is just a manifestation of what's going on inside of an individual. So again, when we talk cognitive restructuring, what we're set out to do is to rewire the brain. removing the old negative thought patterns and replacing those thought patterns with positive and pro-social thought patterns. Some of you are familiar with the terms, and it's a biblical term, that what a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so it's very true with the cognitive behavioral process as well. So with the cognitive iceberg, the main idea is we want to go beneath the waterline and address the issues that we cannot see in an individual's lives. Now, if we can effectively address issues of core belief, thinking patterns, sensations within the bodies, irrational thoughts, and the feelings that come forth from those thoughts, if we can appropriately and successfully address those issues, then we'll see a change in the behaviors. The next thing that we talk about when it comes to skill interventions is this issue of wants versus needs. And what we teach is that oftentimes people find themselves in trouble when they mistake a want for a need. So we have a process that we use. Now, needs are very real and rational. Wants are not necessary to life. Wants may not be realistic or rational. So we use this acronym called SAFER to determine if something is a want or a need. So what does that acronym mean? The S in SAFER stands for shelter. That's a need. The A stands for air. That's a need. The F stands for food and water. That's a need. The E stands for elimination, which is a need. And the R stands for relationships, which is also a need. So these are the 5 things that we teach when we are teaching the distinction between needs and wants. That if your issue or situation do not fall within those 5 different things, chances are the issue before you is a want and not a need. We need shelter. We need air. We need food and water. We need to eliminate waste from our bodies. And we need relationships. Relationships are very important when it comes to human beings in regards to the need to belong and to associate. So we teach that in a very strong and proficient manner to help young people understand that there is a difference, and we do not want them to mistake a want for a need. We also teach this concept of AFROG. AFROG is very important. Kind of a weird acronym. But we test self-talk through this concept. Rational versus irrational thinking. Rationality means that my thoughts are fact-based, based on reality, and they are objective. Now, facts exist whether we accept them or not, whether we believe them or not. We also teach that there's a difference between facts and truth, because truth is an idea that somebody may believe in. Oftentimes it may involve their fears, dislikes, etc., etc. So how do we teach this idea of rational versus irrational thoughts when it comes to CBT? We use this concept called AFROG, and it's an acronym, AFROG. That's where it comes from. So in a lot of the literature that we produce, you'll see this frog, for the rational behavior training, the ribbit, and then you got that AFROG concept again. There's that frog again. So let's talk about this acronym briefly. The A in AFROG means alive. So basically we can compare our self-talk to these acronyms to determine whether or not the self-talk is rational or irrational. So does my self-talk helps me to be alive and gives me a quality standard of living? So am I alive and flourishing with my self-talk? That's what A is for. The F stands for feelings. How does my self-talk make me feel? Does it make me feel good? Does it make me feel bad? Does it make me feel positive, or does it make me feel negative? The R in AFROG. Are my beliefs, are my thoughts based on reality? Is it true? Is it rational? Is it real? So we teach that as well. The O is a frog, means how does my self-talk helps me in relationship to others? Does it make me feel good about my relationship to others, or does it make me feel bad? So we can actually compare our self-talk to our relationship with others. And finally, the G stands for goals. My self-talk helped me to reach my goals. We talk about SMART goals a lot in RBT. We want, our goals to be time-centered. We want our goals to be specific. We want our goals to be obtainable. We want our goals to be based on reality and, are they actually doable? These are some things that we talk about with SMART goals. So my self-talk helped me to reach those goals. And SMART goals is a great way of comparing your self-talk and whether or not my self-talk is goal-oriented. I want to close with this idea of irrational ideas when we talk self-talk. Dr. Albert Ellis, who is considered the father of rational emotive behavioral therapy, did a lot of work. He talked about 12 irrational ideas. Some research talks about the 13 irrational ideas. But what we do in CBT, and more specifically RBT, which is rational behavior training, is we focus on these irrational ideas. So if a kid has an ought, if a kid has grievance or a complaint, one of the things that we do when we're processing with young people is that we can run their mindset through this idea of irrational ideas. And so in the RBT process, we focus on 6 major irrational ideas, and I'll briefly go through those. The first irrational idea when it comes to life is I can't stand it. I can't take it. The second is things should be different. I don't like how things are, and things should be different for me. The third is I'm no good, self-demoralizing. The fourth, you're no good, you're no good, you're defective. The fifth is we're catastrophizing things. Everything is terrible, we're doomed. We oftentimes call that the doomsday mentality. And then number 6 is the robot. I responded because he made me do it. I responded because she made me do it. I responded because the devil made me do it. So we're not robots. We are masters of our own fate, and we do have control over our decisions to a great degree. So these are some very important concepts that we discuss. Many facilities that use this CBT, RBT concept will have posters throughout the living quarters, and they will give documents to kids to remind them. Some of them have cards that they can put in their pockets, cards to remind them of these different ideas and belief systems and so forth. So just another word about rational versus irrational thought. Rational thinking makes sense. Irrational thinking brings forth nonsense. Appropriate behaviors helps me to reach my goals. Inappropriate behaviors take away from my goals. Negative thinking creates negative feelings, which create negative behaviors. And then positive thinking creates positive behaviors or feelings, which brings forth positive behaviors. So hopefully you will find this series is very beneficial to you. We strongly believe in the CBT process, and as you learn and grow in this process and be able to apply it, you'll find tremendous results with those people who are exposed to the teachings. It's a simple step-by-step process where we can be able to lay this forth in very simple terms. We get to observe behaviors, evaluate behaviors, provide feedback, positive feedback, reinforce the behaviors that we're seeing as we see this RBT applied to people's lives, and we can be able to support them as they move on beyond our facilities and into life and see successful results as they interact in regards to day-to-day living, whether it's in school, in their homes, on the jobs, extracurricular activities, whatever it is they decide to do. So again, I want to thank you for joining us in part 4 of this 4-part series of teaching responsibilities. If you had the opportunity to log in through YouTube, I want to thank you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and like us there. We appreciate that very much because we'll have future material coming down the pipe. If you had the opportunity to log in through my website, which is www.rgstrategicinterventions.com, I want to thank you. There's many other modules and series that you will have an opportunity to review, and I think it will greatly benefit you in regards to your professional development and growth. I want to encourage you to use the Berean concept. So you've heard a lot of good information, but I want to encourage you to do further research to make sure that the things that you're getting are accurate, and it will just build a stronger foundation for you in regards to all of these things that you've heard that we presented. So again, thank you so much, and we look forward to working with you and you logging on for future presentations. Thank you so much.